Hey, Edu Transformers, student-centered champions, tuning in near and far. I have the great privilege of sitting down virtually with someone I very much admire for the work that they're doing in schools to really create active game-based experiences and really energizing a lot of youth. And I just had the opportunity to see this person present at the 21st Century Learning Conference here in Hong Kong and was more moved by what they're doing and want to explore how game design could be used in schools and also implications it has for you in your classrooms and where to find out more about this person. So welcome, Vince, to the podcast.
Hello, good to see you again, Kyle.
Yeah, great to see you as well. We see each other a lot in different various spaces here in Hong Kong. How long have you been in Hong Kong, by the way? Are you born and raised here?
My whole life, my whole life.
Okay.
Yeah,
So yeah, I definitely, if you're tuning in, I definitely encourage you to check out Hong Kong. We're doing some pretty cool things, but I want to start with Vince's bio, just to share a little bit background of him. He's the founder of Press Start Studios, introduces innovative, inspiring, interactive learning products. Through his Press Start Academy, they bring them to life through immersive, impactful in-person learning experiences. In an adjacent not-for-profit role, he's a founding lead curator for Games for Change in Hong Kong, Asia's first local chapter of an inspiring global movement, spotlighting the power of games to change and the change that the game industry is leading. Asia is ready to lead the conversation, which I wholeheartedly agree with, on top down and bottom up impact through immersive mediums, and has plenty of exciting stories of experimentation and innovation to tell. And they're aiming to push these boundaries through Games for Change. He's deeply passionate and committed to social impact and change and endeavors to support meaningful causes wherever he can, both through his organizations and in his own personal capacity. So
you just
that
you just
is
read my
Vince.
entire LinkedIn bio. Thanks.
Pretty much. How did you know it was a LinkedIn bio? No, I took that from memory. What are you talking about? Hey, it was so well written, I didn't have to feed it through AI, to shorten it or change
Good.
anything.
I didn't either. So just for the record.
Okay, but even if you did, we wouldn't judge you harshly because there's none of those long dashes in there. That's how I knew it wasn't
Oh
AI.
no.
But let's dive in. What makes games in your mind such a powerful tool for learning?
I think, well, the easiest question that I start off with is, do you like to have fun?
Hmm.
And I think that it would be a very unhuman answer to say no. I do differentiate between making something fun and using a game because I love games. Not everybody loves games per se,
Hmm.
but I think everybody likes to have fun, right? So, a standard answer that a standard question that I always start off with when even talk to teachers in schools is, do we actually need a game for this? Because I don't think games are the solution to everything. I don't think everything needs to be a game, but I think everything should be fun.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, you can look at the studies, everything. If we interact with something, it is
Hmm.
much more memorable than if we just read it or we listen to it or anything. So there's a lot of that, I guess, that backs it up. But fundamentally, learning is fun and should be fun.
Imagine that, right? The whole ethos around learning, just to have fun, right? Because we're
Exactly.
so focused in schools, it's like outcome, output, academic achievement, right?
But the thing is for me also that like I don't think these things are mutually exclusive,
Hmm.
right? Just because you need to be productive and you need to get something out of like a classroom or a curriculum doesn't necessarily mean that it has to not be fun, right?
Hmm.
And I think that that's one of the key things that in terms of how, interestingly, I get this question from teachers a lot, and I get this question from parents a lot is when you speak to teachers, how do they respond about the things that we are doing? And I think that again, that's where you separate the games and the fun piece.
Hmm.
Games has a lot of stigma attached to it for right or wrong reasons. But who says that learning needs to not be fun? Do you want your
Hmm.
kids to have fun? Do you want your students to be enjoying their learning? We're
Hmm.
on the same boat, right?
Hmm.
We have the space and the privilege to be able to do it to a much more complete manifestation of a game.
Hmm.
But at the core of it, we're shooting for the same outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah, and speaking of that fun thing, it might not be a game so much, but just an anecdote. Our kids are putting together these empires. They got to choose their empires, and the whole question was around what causes the rise and fall of empires. And the kids were on Minecraft putting together just not necessarily a game, but they're putting together a recreation of that particular empire, right? And these kids are coming in before school, they're after school, they're at lunch. They're engrossed in this, 5, 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours. It's like their favorite thing, right? They completely disappear into these kind of experiences, right? And I guess if we lean in and see what kids are already doing outside of school, how do we, and focus on how we bring that in schools.
I mean, I love it because, we speak about agency all the time in the classroom. Games are about agency, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what are kids playing? What are they having fun with? I mean, not to say that we always have to replicate it, but we know what drives them. What drives them is that they have a say and they're able to shape the outcome of something. They get passionate about these things all the time and very, very easily too. And to
Mm-hmm.
me, that's like, yeah, we can shoot for a lot of curricular outcomes, a lot of academic outcomes, but these are the anecdotal things that just show a lot of things that can reflect like how deep they are into the learning process. Is they are coming in early to do it, right? For a lot of our after school programs, we do like creative writing programs and we call them learning adventures. And
Mm-hmm.
so the students are going on adventure with us
Mm-hmm.
in the classroom. And the best type of feedback that I just overhear is just, oh, I don't want this class to end. Like,
Hmm.
can we not end yet? I want to see what happens next. Or you overhear them telling their parents, can we come back tomorrow? Stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's that is the ripple effects. Like to me, when I tell my instructors in like our KPIs are very simple. We want the kids to not leave, or we want them to come back immediately. Because if that's the case, then we know that they're engaged enough to want to continue with the fun and the learning, and
Mm.
that will naturally present itself as like academic outcomes. The parents will see the amount of stuff that they're writing, and
Mm.
the parents will see the outcomes, and then they'll see the enjoyment, and naturally they will enroll again. So that all stems from that core part of that classroom experience because all the other numbers, KPIs will come after that.
Yeah, I love that too. They mentioned KPIs. And for those who aren't familiar, I mean, it's a big phrase here in Hong Kong. You can't get away from people asking, "What's your KPI?" I was at the teach meet and someone says, "Well, I like project-based learning and the stuff you're doing with Montessori, but what's your KPI?" And I was like, happy kids, like more people signing up for the program." Like, it's like, hey, what do you want some numbers like quantification? It's so interesting how we
I
try to
mean,
quantify everything.
KPI stands for key performance indicator, and that is
Yeah.
the best key performance indicator right there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what more could you want? Anyway, so you touched on a couple of those things. You mentioned the creative writing thing you do at schools. Is, Press Academy, which is, what you founded. Is that kind of the core mission, just to make things more fun and a game-based way? And what is some of the work you're doing in schools?
Yeah, so Press Start Academy focuses on game-based learning,
Mm,
and actually within that, it's a very specific subset of subjects. For primary levels, we focus on creative storytelling and creative writing. For secondary and above, we focus on game design.
okay.
The the through line is pretty simple. We like having fun.
Hmm.
We think that games are a super immersive and interactive way to not only have fun and learn, but actually to also learn about storytelling
Hmm.
and learn about narratives and writing and structures and things like that. So that's really the core of what Press Start does is narratives and writing and stories and creativity and games.
Okay.
How that translates in the classroom will look slightly different per age range because yeah, different ages of kids respond differently to different scenarios.
Hmm.
When it is younger, we are going to have storylines that are more linear,
Hmm.
and the learning outcomes are going to be slightly more on the nose. But that is also, more conducive to the way that younger children learn, right?
Hmm.
So how this plays out in the classroom is, well, you encounter a boss who is a spelling boss. You
Hmm.
defeat them by your spells, which are actually spells. You got to spell the word to defeat the boss, and that's the sort of reinforcement of the spelling and the learning and things like that. You also have like say, rhyming trolls or synonym fairies or something, right? So in order to get past this obstacle, you got to be able to, exhibit those skills. And it
Okay.
helps that it is in a group-based environment, and there it is led by a human instructor. So for those of you and for Kyle as well, if you're familiar with Dungeons and Dragons, it is
Hmm.
very much that we are trying to replicate that sort of environment in the classroom. Now,
Okay.
the older we get, the more open-ended the story becomes, right? Because you
Hmm.
can imagine a 4-year-old might love a spelling troll or a spelling
Hmm.
monster. 8-year-old, 10-year-old will not like that,
Hmm.
right? It's kind of they're too cool for that. They're too
Hmm.
old for that. So we open it up a little bit more. There's a lot more free form storytelling, but we do introduce a lot of like parts of speech and writing techniques and sentence structures and things like that that will come through as part of their retelling or the capturing of their story.
Hmm.
So one of the core parts of our learning experience is what we call a quest journal.
Hmm.
Yeah, you can call it a logbook or just an adventure log or something like that. But to us, it is not just the evidence of learning; it is also how they keep a record of their adventure. So
Hmm.
all the loot that they collect throughout, all the monsters that they fought, basically what happened in each encounter, that those are actually the writing assignments.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right. So, Kyle, why don't you write about how you navigated this trap together with your friends? But then we'll ask, like, Justin, why don't you write about how you use your spell as the final finishing blow to the final boss, right?
Hmm.
That dresses up a lot of the writing behind the fun, because
Hmm.
as we all know, when kids get excited about something, they can't stop telling you about it. So
Hmm.
we just ask them to write about it. And one of the other great best feedback or offhand remarks that we hear is, can I have one? Can I have an extra sheet of paper? This box doesn't fit enough of my story.
Hmm.
And to them, it is that they want to have include so much detail from their adventures that they can't stop writing about it. To me, they just want to do more homework,
Hmm.
and that's great.
Yeah.
I have one anecdote. I have one anecdote to share, which was super cool. Our head of learning, his name is Logan. He shared this story with me last year. I think it was a third grade student who, 10 weeks into like a 13-week after school program, in the middle of a writing exercise, she just like slaps her hand on the table. She's like, "You've been making us learn all this time." That was 10 weeks into 13 weeks. So, I think we did pretty good.
Yeah, yeah, there you go. Right, we're tricking them into learning. But
100%.
yeah, no, I mean, I think you've touched on a lot of good aspects. I think people can take to the classroom as well. I mean, as you're even in speaking, I was thinking of me at the computer lab back when I was, I don't know, 11 years old. It was Touch was a game, and the words would come down, and we'd have to spell the word before, it got eaten by the monster or something. And like that's how I
Yeah.
learned, like the homework
That's what I grew
position.
up on too. The edutainment games of old, right? Learning Company, Humongous Entertainment, all those things. Magic School Bus, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's interesting, right? Because it's like, I mean, we revisit a lot of these things in education, right? We talk about like project-based learning goes away for a while and comes back, and it's like AI is the new thing, or we might say game-based learning, and it seems to be like I don't know, we're doing this revolving door, and it's like, well, that was cool for them 10 years ago, but now it's back in. I mean, what about this whole idea of gamification, right? That was big. Is what you're doing or what you're describing the gamifying learning? I know you have like a interesting relationship with that term. So can you tell
Yeah,
me
I
about
mean, I
that?
do. I'm not super hung up on terms. I use
Okay.
gamification when it suits. A lot of people, recognize that term, gamification. It has been a buzzword. I don't know if it still is. Again, frankly, I don't really care. I think whatever helps people understand what it is that we're trying to do, right? I
Hmm.
do think that if we want to academically define what gamification means, it is the use of game concepts
Hmm.
in non-game contexts, right? So the easy reference or easy example for gamification is loyalty programs.
Hmm.
You earn X number of points to unlock something. But I think that actually shortchanges games a lot because
Hmm.
as everybody who has ever played a game before, that is not what all games are, right? It is a very easy way to, I guess, tap into extrinsic motivation. But my issue with that is very simple. Nobody plays loyalty programs for fun, right? So you use loyalty programs and it incentivizes you, but you want to get to those points because you want to redeem a flight ticket or you want to, get a cooking pot or something, right? It's always about what you get out of it. And frankly, badges and leaderboards and points, school is already gamified. It's the same thing.
With
80
grades,
points.
right? Or
Exactly.
your
80 points
ranking.
is a B, correct, 100%. And so I think that the reason I don't use that term anymore is because it doesn't encompass all of what games can do. And certainly it doesn't necessarily make things fun. And so, tapping into intrinsic motivation, that's the agency piece, right? If you are coming in early to school to build worlds on Minecraft, that is intrinsic motivation. You're not giving them grades over it. They're doing it because they are enjoying that process. And that to me is what game-based learning should be about. That's what gamification should be about. If that's the term that people want to use, I'm fine with it.
Okay, nice, nice. Well, yeah, I mean, you addressed one of the shifts. I mean, this show is all about shifts, right? Student-centered shift. How do we shift the motivation or the focus to be less grade-based, right? Or less outcome-based, whether it's a loyalty program or some incentive or badges or leaderboards or superstars, and make it more intrinsic, motivated. And one of the ways to do that is to make it maybe a real kind of tangible outcome where they see that they're actually benefiting something. We were starting to do something on Saturday at the learning conference, and you had to sit down, and we were doing, I think the question was around reefs and rainforests, and I think the whole prompt was just designing a game around the wonders of the reefs or the heartbeat of the rainforest. You talk about that, and then what you did with us, and then also the different steps of when you think of game design.
Sure. Well, speaking of shifts, right? I think there's also an important shift around how we understand the role that games can play. So maybe I'll start with that first because I look at games much more as a process than as an output. A lot of people will associate games as that's the end product, that's the outcome, right? We're going to use a game-based platform. We're going to use this solution. Let's pay X amount of money to develop a game for this thing. Let's use Kahoot. Let's use something. And there's a lot of value and prestige like prescribed to this thing, right? Which is great. That's one manifestation of it. But I will paraphrase what a good friend of mine said, and that is, I think everybody should know how to design games. Sorry, not everybody needs to develop games, but everybody should know how to think like a game designer.
I like that.
Because games to me is a process, and at the core of it is very simple. When you are designing a game, you are turning a complex topic into something that is accessible and fun to people. So understanding how to design a game about anything from reefs and rainforests to about a school itself requires you first to understand like the composite pieces and the components to that topic, make sense of it, understands the sort of dynamics and the relationship between those components, and then make it so that your audience understands it completely and easily and is able to follow and grasp and whatever you have set out for them. And it also has to be fun, which is why I think it applies so well to education because that's what teachers do on a daily basis. So really, the best teachers should be the best game designers. You just don't know it yet. So that's the thing, right? Like you were asking about like the process of running that sort of experience. It's pretty simple. It's the same exact process that I use when I create our curriculums. And when teachers create their own curriculums, it's what is the topic that you want to make sense of? What are the outcomes you want to get, you want your audience or your students to get out of it? how do you divide it into chunks? The modules in curriculums are levels in games. The first intro unit that you do in your curriculum is a tutorial level in a game. And it's just so that, the protagonist so happens to be the student. And then the NPCs and the loot that they pick up, the NPCs that they meet are all the things that they are encountering in the middle, right? It's just how do we make it so that it is fun? So if you're designing a game about coral reefs, then are you coming at it from the perspective of a fish who is living in an endangered environment? Are you coming at it from a fisherman whose livelihood is in danger? Are you coming at it from I don't know, like an oil tanker who needs to change the course of the voyage or not based on what waters are kept pristine, right? So any one of those perspectives will change how you present that topic, as we all well know in the classrooms. So it really is just a really slight tangential shift.
Yeah, yeah, no, I love that illustration. I love the way you even thinking about that as a game. And I think that shift alone, if we start viewing our curriculum a little bit more in that lens and what's going to excite kids, right? Yes, we have these outcomes, these understandings we want them to get to, but if they feel like they're playing a game and they're getting to the end of a game, suddenly the motivation, right, shifts. Of course, we want everyone to care about the reefs and rainforest, right? But it doesn't mean something to students unless it's something like really tangible and simple. That's why I love the game-based approach. And if anyone who's listening to this, I'd challenge them also to think. You talked a bit about even when they're doing the primary level, these quests or these adventures that they're going on, right? And there's these spells, right? It's like suddenly now I'm not going through books and having to go to the next chapter. I'm actually in the next stage of a quest or an adventure where there's like this foreseeable outcome, which I also, as a big proponent of project-based learning, advocate for as well. It's like, okay, I do know that, eventually we are going to be building a playground of some sort, right? And there's a lot of things I need to know, or protecting a local reef. So, I mean, do you see it as that?
Yeah, definitely. I also think that not everything needs to be turned into a game, right? Like, I think that sometimes shoehorning in a game, especially inside a classroom context, makes it a little bit seem too forced.
Okay.
Your students are going to be like, this is so lame, and you're obviously going to get us to do this, X, Y, Z. So I think that, again, like not everything needs to be a game, but there are a lot of principles in terms of how we sprinkle in instructions or how we change things up. So as simple as, what I'm going to use your example. At the end, you might build a playground. Maybe throughout you give them additional challenges, or hey, here's a world event that is now affecting, right? The event means that you are now for the next 30 minutes are not allowed to use any cardboard, something like that, right? It's just kind of like you're not turning it into like, oh, all of a sudden a monster has come. Like it doesn't have to get to that level. It's just that additional challenge that makes it slightly harder, and throws them off a little bit while keeping them on the same course, right? So they're veering us slightly off. Or you can add in some sort of like currency system where it's like, hey, you only have 10 gold to spend. And each like big cardboard box or each use of a tool costs you 2 gold or something like that. So then they got to plan out how they approach all that stuff. But to me, it's only useful if all of this comes back in some way, right?
Okay.
If it is just like throwing a spanner in the works to make them work harder, then it doesn't seem as effective. But if, for example, in their final report or in their presentation, they also have to present how they allocated the 10 gold, right? Or how they responded to a lack of cardboard. Like, did they just wait for half an hour without cardboard, or did they switch gears into doing something else? There's a lot of really interesting learning and insights and reflection that they can get out of it. And more importantly, if they're younger, that we can help them with the reflection on. Right?
Yeah, yeah.
So it is about contextualizing all of that and making sure that it's not just the gimmick that we're adding into it, because there's way too many gimmicks out there. And
Yeah.
how do we make those pieces, actually matter?
Yeah, and I hear that coming loud and clear, right? You were talking about the gimmick of just, if you gamify everything and there's leaderboards and it's still like, how is that different than how we're currently playing school, right? And you're also mentioning another shift, which I think is quite important with this idea of process. Like, okay, what did you do when you encounter those particular challenges or problems, right? Because we're so product focused, exam focused, right? And like for kids to be able to reflect on that process as well is so important. Um, I also want to give you an opportunity to chat a bit about, AI is like the next thing. We're entrenched in it everywhere, right? Does that fit into what you're doing with schools and in this whole game design thing? And in what ways?
Yeah, I think AI is entrenched everywhere. Cannot
Hmm.
escape it. How that plays out is can look different in different settings, obviously. Um, I think at the core of it, what it allows students to do, there's two levels, there's students and teachers. So I'll start with the student level. Is if we are asking them to design a game,
Hmm.
you can get to pretty nice prototypes pretty quickly. And not to say that that's a shortcut that we should advocate for,
Hmm.
because there's a huge amount of value in the craft, right? Whether it's the coding, whether it's the visual design, whether it's the 3D printing and the laser cutting and all that stuff, there's a lot of value to that. But a large part of, especially the younger or the shorter game jams that we organize and we run with schools, is the focus on game design rather than game development. I look at these two things as quite separate, as development is more the technical build, the
Mm,
engineering, whether it's computer
mm.
engineering or physical engineering. Design as in what is the intention, what is the vision, what is the direction that you want to have for your project.
Kind of like for a
Right.
house, like the architect versus the engineer, right? The one who's
100%.
actually the tools building it.
Right. And so when we are time poor, we want to do a game jam.
Hmm.
It is much more about what is the message you want to deliver with this game, and it's the same exact process for a project anyway.
Hmm.
And then what do you want to showcase, and what do you want to prototype as part of your presentation to have those ideas stick
Hmm.
and land in front of your audience. In those cases, using AI to prototype gets it from, if you only have 3 hours for a game jam, as we sometimes do for a school,
Hmm.
your students will be able to showcase something that looks like a more legitimate reference or inspiration as opposed to just pen and paper sketches,
Hmm.
right? Obviously, you want to run this as a week-long thing, which we also do. Then that's a lot of really good time for them to, like you said, go into Minecraft and build out the worlds,
Hmm.
and go into like the software to, 3D, model things.
Hmm.
So it is a trade-off in terms of time. From a teacher's level, it's the same thing. You are now able to create so many more options for assignments and
Hmm.
projects. I mean,
Hmm.
the example that I like to give, and we will also work with teachers on stuff like this too, in terms of like developing curriculum that's suitable for their classes.
Hmm.
If you want to do a case study for students, now if you have 30 students, they can all look at 30 different case studies,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? Because if what you're measuring is the skill rather than the knowledge, then it's the skill of how you approach this case study.
Hmm.
We have that for one of our after school programs in debate,
Hmm.
which is actually set inside a murder mystery story.
Hmm.
And we have routinely a lot of different stages where basically the students find themselves inside this fictional town, and they got to go around and talk to eyewitnesses.
Hmm.
Now, usually in the normal classroom, it's the eyewitness is like a book that everybody shares, and you look at the same characters, right? But how do you encourage more talking between and sharing of knowledge and all that? Is that Kyle looks at one NPC and talks to that NPC, right? You have a case file with this character, and this is what they said as the testimonial. Another classmate looks at another character. You cannot both look at the same character. And
Hmm.
so what that does is that you need to be able to analyze your character, come up with your own conclusion, wait for your classmate to do the same for their own character, and then discuss using incomplete information.
Hmm.
So a lot of that qualitative learning and the skill-based learning is from that process.
Hmm.
And how that all comes together is how they then construct that argument that they then use to debate the other side of the class. Um,
Okay.
so it's much easier for teachers to create materials like that now. And then there's so many more, so much more potential that comes from that.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess the real shift is how they're looking at their curriculum, right? If they look at their curriculum as being this kind of adventure or this quest, and there's these different modules, they're differentiating, as you mentioned, because they have different character, profiles within this murder mystery. You said NPC. What's that stand for again?
That stands for non-player character. So it's a character
Okay.
that you're not controlling. It's a character that's just in the story that will
Okay.
contain some sort of information for you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and this is a great way also to get at, I don't know, a lot of these literary terms that we use, right? When we're talking about first person, second person, third person. So you can get a lot of that as well. And you mentioned these game jams. You kind of just briefly mentioned them. Maybe you could share a little bit more. You do these game jams. It's like you said, a week long, or it's a 24-hour experience. And do you get a bunch of schools together? What does that look like?
It actually looks quite different depending on the context. In a nutshell, a game jam is a short experience, a short, tight, intensive experience where students create a game based on a topic.
Okay.
This can be as short as 3 hours. We've done that. This can go to 6 hours over 2 days. It could be a week, 10 hours across a week. It can be one full weekend, and
Hmm.
so on. The level of depth in the output is what varies, but
Hmm.
again, it is very much focused on game design rather than game development. We can go a
Hmm.
lot more into development if we have more time, but at the core of it, it is an exercise of being able to think in systems and being able to present ideas and being able to distill a lot of these complex ideas into playable rules.
Hmm.
So that's the beauty of games, is
Hmm.
because you're already practicing systems thinking without actively thinking about it.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that's the reason we position these game jams the way that we do.
Okay, wonderful. And are you just doing this with students? Because I can imagine even teachers might bring, hey, let me bring this curriculum, let me bring this gigantic unit, and
Yeah,
like how might I jam and turn that into like make it more game based, for my
we
kid.
have 100% done something like this for teachers,
Hmm.
and that's a lot of fun. That is so
Hmm.
much fun because you can see the most important thing is that you can see the teachers having fun.
Yeah, yeah.
We were talking about student agency earlier. In games, it is player agency, but to me, there is no student agency really unless there is teacher agency.
Hmm. Hmm.
And being able to, I did a session at a university in Singapore last year, where the starting prompt was, well, what favorite movies and stories and games do you like? And let's start with that as a reference and link that back to what you're teaching right now.
Hmm. Hmm.
One idea that will stay with me for a long time is, the hawker centers and the food centers in Singapore.
Yeah.
So one of the professors who was in nursing was like, "Oh, I really love hawker centers. I think that it's super like fascinating how they manage to get all the ingredients and sell it for so cheap, and make great food at such low cost and such efficient practice and stuff." And they managed to link that to how to talk about operations and optimization in a
Hmm.
hospital.
Hmm.
So they ended up creating a whole module where they used like a hawker center simulation game
Interesting.
to introduce scarcity and optimization in a nursing situation inside a hospital. And to me, it's like that's so cool. And
Hmm.
it's the power of like drawing connections laterally like that that all
Hmm.
stems from what gets you excited as the teacher.
Hmm.
And that is super fun to see.
Yeah, yeah, I love that too because there's so much of like this strategizing and like you go to a workshop and it's like you're very much kind of an instructor and then you're learning some of these strategies to try to implement, but it's really a mindset shift. I feel like it's almost like a teacher has to think like a game master, as opposed to just thinking like a teacher and delivering things. I'd love to hear just a bit before we close this up, like in the classroom, what shifts do you think the teacher has to make to be positioned to better game up, make more game design, in their classroom?
Well, I think it's a couple of different things. Firstly, I think thinking like a game designer is actually a lot simpler than it sounds.
Hmm.
Because yeah, you don't need to have played a lot of games. You can just draw on your favorite games.
Hmm.
And it can be as simple as Uno
Hmm.
or Mahjong or something
Hmm.
like that, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, you can nerd out about like long strategy games and so on, but all of these games that we love and we enjoy already contain references and inspirations that we can lift immediately.
Hmm.
So it is about thinking a little, like taking a step back and thinking about why we enjoy the things that we enjoy, right?
Hmm.
Star Wars is a fertile ground, because you can use that as allegory, which it is meant to be, allegory of history, of politics, of
Hmm.
society, and so on, right? And that's how the entire story was built. You can use that same process for basically any pop culture medium that is out there.
Hmm.
So that's one. Secondly, I think, like you said, like, yeah, sure, teachers should think more like game masters and facilitators.
Hmm.
But at the end of the day, it's much more about like, that's the storytelling side,
Hmm.
right? Do you need to have played Dungeons and Dragons before? No. Do you want to tell better stories? Yeah. But that's what teachers should be aiming for anyway, right?
Hmm.
Is it easier to lecture and read through a textbook, or is it easier to find and to build characters based on Cleopatra and Tutankhamun and have the setting inside like the ancient pyramids?
Hmm.
Every teacher who's taught this unit will know that when you have that sort of role play, when you set it, your exercises in that setting, your students are going to respond 100% better,
Hmm.
right? So it is about those same concepts and being able to think about it as you're leading your students on this adventure.
Yeah.
Again, doesn't have to look like a game. It's just that mindset of let's figure this out together.
Hmm.
I'll equip you with the tools. This is fun. Let's figure
Hmm.
this out together, and have fun along the process, and that goes a long way.
Yeah, and I could simply see even someone prompting into AI like here's my curriculum, here's my next topic. Like how do we make this more game based? What are the different parts of the quest that kids could go on, right?
Definitely,
And that could be each week along that particular quest where they're gathering, some new information for whatever that
definitely.
thing is that they need, right? And you're going along, with them. And I even see potentially teachers taking that particular unit or that topic and even giving it to kids, as you kind of did with us, and asking them to create a game, out of it, which I think would also, serve a lot of value. So, anything else that you wanted to add? I saw you about to jump in.
No, no, just nodding vehemently.
All right. Well, I think we're preaching to the choir, and I think if you're listening to this and you got this far, you're definitely a believer. You might need some tangible steps, right? Which I hope that we've given, in terms of looking at your particular curriculum and how you might make that a little bit more game based, how you might get students to creating their own games. And the good news is you have a partner in crime with Vince, to be able to help support you in that. Do you do online stuff, Vince, or is it mainly like you do in person stuff?
I am very happy to do online stuff.
Okay.
I think that's something that I would love to continue to do. I did a fair bit during COVID, actually.
Hmm.
Right now, there's been a lot of in-person workshops that I do when I travel, and that's obviously very fun because we get to actually play games and we
Hmm.
get to, I mean, there's also a lot of value to physically prototyping.
Hmm.
When we do teacher workshops, you build a game with your team, another group builds a game, and then after like an hour, you kind of play each other's games
Oh, that's fun.
and give feedback, and that's a lot of like super useful feedback that is given immediately. Can still be done online, not as effective, but when it comes to like the ideation and the creation of the actual experience, then yes, I do support teams online for sure.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. I think there's a lot of people want to get in contact with you. What's the best way to get a hold of you?
LinkedIn is good. I'm assuming this will be posted on LinkedIn. Feel free to
Yep.
DM me, and then I'm happy to share like my email and other ways.
Okay, well, thanks so much, Vince, for the conversation and for helping us think more like a game designer.
Thanks, Kyle.